Hey there, Lead the Team Nation, and welcome back to another great episode. Today, I have for you Scott Giberson, who is the president of AMI Expeditionary Healthcare, which provides medical solutions and services to some of the most remote and challenging environments in the world. And we're going to dig into that, but just wait to hear about his background. He has had a 27-year active duty career, retired as a two-star admiral in 2021, and also served as the acting deputy surgeon general of the United States in 2013 and 2014. He was selected by the Military Officers Association of America, which, by the way, is the largest military advocacy organization in the U.S., as one of the top 100 veterans in the last 100 years that you need to know. And he's also had health-related leadership roles in clinical care on American Indian reservations to fight disease outbreaks, worked in multiple countries on health diplomacy missions, and running the headquarter operations of a uniformed service of the United States called the Invisible Corps, which we're going to dive into a little bit here today. Scott, welcome to Lead the Team, sir.
Hey, Ben, good morning. It's good to talk to you.
So, y'all, before we got on, my family and I just got back from Alaska and had an amazing trip. And Scott will just relay a little bit about it. Scott, you said for you, Alaska is a special place. What comes up
Yeah,
there?
you're absolutely right, Ben. Starts off as a child. My father took me on a camping trip in Alaska when I was a very young person. I think I was probably a single digit age, and we spent, I think, 3 weeks in Alaska camping. But to this day, I've been there for work for different reasons, and I think it's one of the most powerful places in the world from a nature, beauty, just a powerful experience to be there and to share time there with family and friends and now colleagues I have done. So it's been a great place for me.
Well, so we were out there not 3 weeks. I wish we would have been there for 3 weeks. We saw three bears, brown bears, not super close, but close enough.
Right.
Have you seen bear wildlife?
Sure. We've seen all the wildlife, the bear, the moose, the wolves, and of course
Everything.
the American eagles, which are a sight to see all the time.
I mean, there are, I've sseen eagles before, but not like in Alaska. I mean,
Right.
they are everywhere, and their nests are huge. And
Majestic birds, and like I said, it's a powerful place. It's inspiring to be there,
mm,
and it gives you the energy you need to do your job sometimes.
yeah, I bet. So, expeditionary healthcare. When I saw this, and
Sure.
we were researching your background, I thought, man, this seems extremely cool. But also, like, a lot of problems can pop up because that's the nature of expeditionary, meaning that you're in parts of the world that don't have a lot of healthcare access. That's why it's called expeditionary, right?
That's
What
true.
what's the
That's
scoop on
true.
this organization?
Well, the organization is just what you said. It's a solutions based organization that provides healthcare solutions for a wide variety of challenges, and it doesn't have to be global. We certainly have a global portfolio. We own brick and mortar clinics in countries that aren't generally the countries that people
Mm,
visit: Liberia, Sierra Leone, South Sudan,
well,
Libya. So these are places that are strife with a lot of different challenges, whether it's political conflict, whether it's lack of resources, vulnerable populations, just a lot of challenges. And so we own medical clinics in those places. We work with WHO, the United Nations, different entities like that. And then we have our domestic portfolio, which is also tied very closely to the U.S. government. So
mm,
places that aren't necessarily um, uh, easy to get to or easy to function in. For example, the border. So we have a border health crisis, and we have contracts all along the border with the U.S. government, Homeland Security,
mhm.
Customs and Border Patrol, and we work in a variety of settings and a variety of either remote or austere conditions. It doesn't have to be, someplace that nobody can get to. It could be in a city, but if it's a challenging situation or an austere condition, that's sort of our specialty, and so we certainly function well in that sort of a crisis environment.
Well,
We work with states in a lot of different places. So we have a different set of customers, but we pride ourselves on responsiveness and sort of the ability to function in just about any type of environment, even the normal ones.
So
it's
it's interesting
exciting
to me is you have such a huge buildup career wise to this role. I mean, and I want to dig into all that, but I'm curious, since you've been in this role with expeditionary healthcare, do you have a favorite leadership story or experience that's come up since you've been at the helm of the new organization?
At the helm of the new organization, a lot of it in the new organization has been dealing with COVID. So we were a COVID response organization, much like everybody else. We spent 2.5 years and still a little bit working COVID issues. So depending on what the contract was or what the situation was, it played a big role in our business and the revenue generation throughout the last 2.5 years. But I can tell you that probably the sort of story for me in terms of crisis leadership, dealing with all kinds of leadership issues and competencies would be when I was in command of the Ebola response for the Commission Corps, and that was in 2014 and 15.
Mm-hmm.
So I could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, let's hear that. Ebola was scary. That was really scary because of all the news about what was happening to people that contracted it. I mean,
so Ebola was a challenge. I'll just, first of all, it was a privilege to be chosen as command for that. The Surgeon General, the Secretary of Health, and the President of the United States, were aware of myself leading the charge there. And the President Obama at the time, tasked us to open up an Ebola health unit, which was part of the missions. I mean, the bottom line strategy was stop Ebola at its source in Africa. So right there was a big enough challenge for all of us. And it involved the Department of Defense. It involved the CDC. It involved the State Department because it was working with ambassadors, ministers of health from other nations. So we had never done something like this in our history. And just to paint the picture, like you said, you're talking about one of the deadliest diseases on the planet. When we think about COVID, and this is just a relative sort of comparison, and believe me, COVID killed millions and millions of people, infected hundreds of millions of people, which Ebola doesn't do and didn't do. But as far as case fatality, and that's if you're diagnosed with Ebola, there's a range between 40 to 80% you're going to die. And so it's incredibly lethal. With COVID overall, it was less than 1%. You're talking about less than 1% case fatality versus, up to 80, 90% case fatality. So if you got Ebola in Liberia, there's a very good chance, flip a coin, if you're going to make it or not. So our role was to open up a clinic for healthcare workers. And I say it's the Commission Corps was a primary partner in the response for the United States. And I got to lead that. And the primary mission for us was to open up this health clinic. And it was not a health clinic. It was to take care of Ebola patients. So it was a hot zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talk about leadership competencies. I mean, we've never done this before in our history. And I had to think of all the different leadership competencies that I could possibly engage, right? So tactically, operationally, strategically, and in each compartment, I sort of compartmentalized it. And so, and what you do for tactical piece with your troops that are in the hot zone with you is much different than you do strategically at the highest levels with the President of the United States or an ambassador. And, it goes from the base level inspirational talks, like giving a battle speech to the troops that were going in the hot zone every day, that had to have the resilience and the uncertainty and the stress level was off the charts for them. And so as an admiral, that, my goal was to give them comfort, reframe it, maybe focus on your skill sets versus the uncertainty, focus on what you should be doing and how good you are at it versus worrying about, getting afflicted with Ebola. And then you compartmentalize. So the next piece, operationally, people, process, systems, right? The three things that you think about operationally. And then at the highest level, strategically, relationship building. I mean, to build relationships with ministries of health in different countries at the same time with the ambassadors of the U.S. over there in those areas, at the same time with the Secretary of Health and, of course, the President of the United States, which, a lot of leadership competencies in one fell swoop. And it was probably it was the most rewarding time. You'd think it was hard and complex, but it was so mission oriented and so mission driven that it was almost easy. Although you were working 20 hours a day and you were in the midst of a deadly disease, it was sometimes a lot easier to function than, say, functioning in Washington with politics, right? So, and I pretty much guarantee you, almost 100% of the people that were working out there with me and that were dedicated to it, from the Army, the Navy, the Commissioned Corps, everybody would have gone right back out there and done it again in a blink of an eye. And we'd still do it to this day probably, but yet we'd probably prefer that over some of the other things we have to deal with.
Scott, I'm glad you mentioned that. So you really let us in behind the curtain on how stressful this was, which it was stressful for me. And I was just reading about it and not finding it on the front lines in Africa.
Right.
But I think there's a real nugget in there that really resonated with me when you talked about the mission and how when the mission is clear, everyone's working together, and how it almost helps relieve the stress because you're not worried about all the tangential stuff going on. You're focused and you get everybody moving together. And it's almost, it sounds like you're in the zone.
That's exactly right. All the preparation should have been there before we got there. It was surreal to be on the ground, but you're absolutely right. It was mission focused. It was clear vision, right? I mean, and that can be translated to the corporate world. I mean, your team, in my opinion, your team's only as good as the unified vision that you have, right? And that's analogous to a mission, right? We deploy for a mission. We all have the same outcome in mind. So if you can create that sort of unified vision in a company, which is what we try to do here, and I'm sure many CEOs do that all over the world, and it's not easy to do, but if you can do that, then you have a team focused on a singular outcome, which makes it a lot more efficient and helpful.
Well, tell me about a term that I've read you using called decomplexifying. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of leadership, opportunities. I've been privileged throughout my career to have some of the variety and diversity of some of the things that I've been allowed to do, and I sense that that's probably similar to a lot of military careers where people get to do a lot of different things in a lot of different roles. So, if you go out there and if you think about leadership development or developing leaders for the future, if you Googled it right now, Ben, you'd probably get 4 billion hits. And I just Googled it right before this interview, and it was over 4 billion hits if you put leadership development or leadership in the Google search. It's an overwhelming amount of information. And for me, decomplexifying leadership or leadership development has become sort of a mantra for me because it is complex. And when I was growing up through the Corps and through leadership experiences, I'm trying to figure it all out. I'm taking academic courses and fellowships and experience OJT, on the job training, and putting it all together. But now I try to help other executives or up and coming executives or C-suite to decomplexify this leadership conundrum. And I want to say that it's I believe leadership isn't complex, okay? But I also don't believe it's easy for everyone. And so it's a kind of a nuance. So it takes a lot of practice to become a good leader. But it only is based on a few competencies. The reason that it isn't easy is because it takes discipline and it takes humility, so that you have a mindset of continual learning. Even at, now I'm in my mid 50s, and yes, I'm sad to admit that, but I'm in my mid 50s and I'm still learning and I have that mindset of constant learning. But it takes discipline and humility, and it takes energy and resilience. And so I often say that anyone can lead because it's not complex, but very few will be great leaders because it's not easy. And so, so I've tried to decomplexify this leadership, and I call it infectious leadership. And that's just because I've been around infectious disease my whole career. I've been involved, unfortunately, in infectious disease my whole career. Sometimes it's gotten to me, meaning I've had, certain infections, but I've also been around it a lot. I was around anthrax. I was around Ebola. I was around COVID. I was H5N1, H1N1, and all the different things that were newspaper, very visible crises in the United States and abroad. And somehow I had roles in these things. And so I've always been around it and developed this infectious leadership type thing where I try to decomplexify leadership.
Wow. So what's the biggest difference between fighting another country or terrorists versus fighting global infections?
That's a great question. I would say the biggest thing that I see is you have a lot more insidious progression. You don't know and see the enemy right up front like you would if you were, if you're trained to fight, if you're a Marine, you have all the skills to go and train and fight, and your specialized warfare assets. And you can go and your enemy, and you know all about your enemy for the most part. And we're very good at it. And that's our Marine Corps and our Army and our Navy. And we have a little bit of a different, situation because it's a little bit amorphous and, infectious disease. We still in today's society learn how to fight it every single day. Obviously, COVID brought up a lot of issues, whether it's, procedures or process, or now very, very big issue with political polarization. We have, it's going to be interesting to see how we do it again in the future, because it'll happen again. And I can't say when, but we have to be prepared for that. So yeah, it's very different. Fighting, disease in different places is also different because there's different resources you have and different people you work with and different cultures you have to understand. So, yeah, it's a lot different, I think.
Wow. Yeah. I think a lot of people miss that in terms of, hey, it's a war either way.
It's a war either way.
It's tough fighting a global pandemic or even regional pandemics. And that's what you've been doing all this time. So thank you for your service on that. And tell us a little bit about the Invisible Corps. You mentioned that there's a documentary coming out on PBS really soon. That sounds like I'm definitely going to check that out. But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, good catch. So the Commissioned Corps of the U.S. Public Health Service is one of the 8 uniformed services of the United States. Military, just like the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, but unarmed. And we've been around for since 1889 as a uniformed service. So many hundreds of years as a uniformed service, but very small and focused. So we're kind of like the Marine Corps of public health. And we've been around and been involved in so many different things. So yes, there's a documentary. I saw it at the end of May. It was released. I believe it's available now on the internet. You can go look it up. It's called The Invisible Corps, and it speaks to the Commissioned Corps of the U.S. Public Health Service. Spent my 26 plus years in the Commissioned Corps of the U.S. Public Health Service, working with some amazing people, and it really is invisible, yet it's woven into the fabric of everything we do, and you wouldn't realize it. So, a lot of the leadership in CDC is an officer in the Commissioned Corps. A lot of the leadership in the FDA, a lot of the leadership, and I'm not talking about political appointees because that's the very top of any organization, even the Department of Defense. But for us, the National Institutes of Health, CDC, they're all Commissioned Corps relevant and salient. So we also get deployed a lot, and we get deployed to just about any disaster you could think of, especially in the last 20 years. All the hurricanes, Rita, Katrina, Irma, mass shootings, Boston Marathon bombing, Ebola, COVID, anthrax, World Trade Center, you name it, we're there. Maybe not as visible because we don't come in with, guns and ammo, but we come in with the knowledge of how to respond in terms of a incident command system, and we integrate into things very well. So whether it's a state response for a hurricane or a federal government response for bioterrorism or an overseas deployment like we had with Ebola, we're always there. And you if you look close enough, you see us in leadership roles. So I think it's a great thing to check out. And certainly I wish the name of the title of the documentary wasn't The Invisible Corps. I would love to make it The Very Visible Corps, but we're small but mighty.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I've learned a lot about it, here today, and I think a lot of our listeners are too. And it's really cool to think about the role that the military plays in these areas where people don't realize it.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking, why does it make so much sense? And I'm like, who is the best, what is the best organizer? or what is the best part of the U.S. government for getting things done in an emergency? It's the military. So
Yes.
it makes total sense that in these situations there would be, an organization that would jump in to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we deploy on command, and it is very similar, almost exact to the fact that, hey, we've got to deploy these Marines to, whatever war or whatever turmoil or environment that has unrest, and we're very much the same way when there's a health crisis or even bioterrorism, like we said in 2001 and 2. We're deployed, and we drop what we're doing at our jobs, and we go.
So what's it like giving briefings to the top of the government entity? I don't know how high up you went. Was it the White House or Pentagon or
Yeah,
whatever?
actually, well, I mean, I have to say that's not a normal thing that I, as an admiral in the Corps, I wouldn't communicate with the president. But during Ebola, I actually spoke to him, and he actually called my cell phone in Liberia. It was a great story, but you don't often get a call from the president of the United States on your cell phone, and it was an honor to lead. But I was so focused on the mission, it didn't really sink in until after I came back from 7 months of back and forth to West Africa, and the team was done with their mission, that I got a chance to really think about how that all played out. Yeah, I mean, it's just like briefing anything else, though. You have your situational rep, your sit rep, and your report to give people and let them know what they need to hear, and you carry on. But it's obviously a great honor to do that, regardless of president. I've been very apolitical across my career, and you sort of have to. It's our commander in chief, regardless, and give them
pretty
everything
cool.
they need to know. It was pretty cool. Yeah,
you got a call from the president on your cell phone.
I did.
And you were just cool as a cucumber because you were focused on the mission. I've been freaking out.
I felt like I was cool as a cucumber, but maybe I wasn't. It was a great call. We talked about the situation in Africa with Ebola, and I think I do remember a quote he said to me. He said, it's rare that you get the chance to save hundreds of thousands of lives. And I thought, yeah, I have the opportunity with the teams and our other partners to save hundreds of thousands of lives, but it's also this, what if I don't? So, there's a certain amount of huge pressure. I mean, it's only Ebola, and it's only the rest of the globe. So, yeah, I mean, it has some pressure, but you know what? We thrive in that kind of pressure, and that's what we're built for. I'll tell you just a part about the Corps and about leadership. We only have about 6,500 folks in the Corps, Commissioned Corps, all officers, all medical, public health experts or professionals. So we don't have enlisted ranks like some of the other services, but everybody, we had 6,500 within probably 72 hours. I had 5,000 emails that said, I want to go to Ebola in Africa. If I want to fight the deadliest disease on the planet with you in Africa. So we had no problems deploying as many as we needed at the time. I think we ended up deploying over 1,000 officers, but these are all medical experts, have gone through medical school, dental school, pharmacy school, nursing school, whatever schools they went through, environmental health, engineers, all the types of specialists that you would think you'd deploy to something like this. So yeah, anyway, back to your point. Yeah, I mean, it was great experience, and certainly speaking with the president was great.
What's the one trait you wish you could instill in every employee, and why do you think it's important?
The one trait I would give to every employee, I would say, be the solution, not the problem. I mean, this isn't necessarily, well, this probably goes for C-suite too, but as a manager, we want people to come to us with issues, challenges, but we also want them to have a solution in their back pocket, because I think that helps people really grow, because it's not a complaint anymore. If you come with a solution, it's not just you complaining to upper management that it's an issue. Sometimes when we get caught, managers, C-suite folks, we forget that they don't bring a solution to the table, and we just jump in because, in order to get to our positions, we've been problem solvers. And And so we
Yeah.
jump into the problem and start fixing it for them or with them. But if I had an entire staff and team that was problem solvers, that'd be a great organization, right? I mean, I think any CEO or president would love the fact that everybody comes with a solution to the problem, a well thought out solution, maybe one that was negotiated or one that was discussed with other people, not just their own solution to the problem. So,
Yeah, I love it because it helps the overall situation that you're in, but also it's really a call to action for them to take charge of their own development and find
exactly
it.
right.
So good.
Exactly right.
What advice would you give your younger self today? Yeah, and by the way, where did you grow up? Because you said you took that young trip to Alaska. So where did you
Yeah.
grow up, and what's the advice you'd give your younger self?
Well, first question. I grew up in upstate Pennsylvania, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton area. And so great upbringing, small town upbringing, and a lot of fun to be there. So what would I give my younger self? Oh my goodness, Ben, I don't think we have enough time in your podcast for me to give my younger self some more advice. I think I'll always be in the mindset of learning how to lead and learning and developing, right? So even like I said, now I still learn and grow. I would say, don't be as defensive as a first mechanism. I'm trying to expose myself here because you read the wonderful bio in the beginning. I see it as a highlight reel. I know all the failures behind those great accomplishments. If you think they're great accomplishments, I say, well, yeah, but I failed, and it's not all the Instagram reel, the great perfect picture.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff in behind that. So I think, in early on, I would take things personally, be more defensive. Then I learned that there's always two lenses or more to look through to find the right answer, and there's always more than one right answer. So I think if I started off in the early days that I was really passionate, no one could ever accuse me of not being a passionate sort of individual. But you tend to get defensive sometimes. You be like, wait, are you saying that I didn't do a good job, or but it really isn't that. It's just they have a different set of variables they're looking and a different lens they're looking through. And if you realize that right off the bat, it sort of sets a tone that's a little different. So yeah, I mean, I think that my younger self was pretty go-getter, and as you said, I've been pretty busy across my career. So yeah, I think that's
No, that's
there's more than
great
one.
because that's where it ties perfectly to your point about learning. Because if you are when we all are defensive, our learning starts to shut down, and when you're kind of open to the feedback, even if it's not from a person you want to hear it from or the message you want to hear, that's where learning starts to kick off. Now, you mentioned a series of failures that you had beneath all of your series of highlight reel that I read off there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite failure that helped you learn something new or something?
I think one of the most impactful failures, I'll go with one that stood the test of time, right? Because it impacted me across my entire career because it happened early in my career. So luckily, my failure, not that I haven't had failures recently or just like everyone else, but very early in my career, I was working in Gallup, New Mexico on an Indian reservation as a clinician provider. I was very frustrated with something personally, had nothing to do with work, but I was in uniform. I was at my duty station. I was working, and I picked up a pencil and I threw it towards the back of the room. There was no public involved, but other officers and other staff members of the hospital were there, and they saw this pencil come flying by. Didn't hurt anybody, but I actually got penalized, for doing that quickly and appropriately from my captain, who was the commanding officer at the hospital. That I did that, reacted completely inappropriately. It was not a big deal, and it was certainly I thought I had, there was a lot of things going on in my personal life at the time that got me frustrated. But boy, it really set in motion that I needed to separate any frustrations or emotions that I have at home from the workplace, and always be professional. And maybe I didn't realize it at the time how much it would have impacted my professional career. But you're in so many situations as a leader or in a C-suite, or of course in my career in the end of my last 11 years as an admiral, where I dealt with political, issues, political appointees, people that, you had to really work very closely with, and you had to remain, no matter how frustrated you are, no matter how upset inside, no matter how somebody else may frustrate you or be completely wrong, you have to remain professional. And there's a quote that I remember somebody gave me, and I don't remember where I got it from. I don't know who originally said the quote, but it takes 20 or plus years to build a reputation and 5 seconds to destroy it. And I've lived by that my whole career, probably, because it is absolutely true. You can destroy your respect, your integrity, your reputation immeasurably by doing just a quick little thing. So it takes a lot of discipline. Once again, I go back to that word, that to remain at that level and be professional. So that's a failure. It was early on in my career, and it almost imprinted on me that this is the way I'm going to act now for the rest of my career. Now, if it's on the side, if I have to, go hit a heavy bag at the gym because I'm frustrated, that's fine. But it doesn't mean I don't have the emotion. It means I control it, and I'm really self-aware of how I respond.
Yeah, such a good point. And for listeners, it may not be familiar with this world, and correct me if I'm wrong, is so political appointees change every so many years, but the people in the organization, running the organization, are there like yourself for a very long time. So
That's correct.
it can be a heck of a roller coaster ride for you.
It is.
And so
It
that
is.
lesson really, it seems like it helped you because there's been a lot of change in administrations, since that time.
Absolutely. And it's my own personal opinion, but I've seen more political polarization over the years, over the last 2 decades, since I've been
Yeah.
at the higher levels of the Corps, which, you interact more with political appointees than you would at a lower level, obviously, just like any other organization that's especially uniformed services. So, uh, my last 11 years, I did spend quite a bit of time learning. Each administration will come in, and I learn from them, and they certainly learn from us. So it is an interesting dynamic. And if you're in the outside of DC and looking in, it looks a little different than the inside looking out. And that's all sort of I'll say about that. But it's great. It definitely builds some leadership competencies, put it that way.
So you mentioned some situations you may need to go, quote, hit a heavy bag at the gym. Are you so what is your favorite stress relief activity outside of work?
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be staying fit as I can, and fit physically. It's important. Fit mentally is important, emotionally. But for me, it is a release to go and uh, uh, test myself or push myself as much as I can in a gym of some sort, and a combination of activities. Now we have to do that for the military anyway. In the uniform, we had to have physical fitness tests, but just a daily grind. I mean, from all the research that's been ongoing with neurochemistry. I mean, it's and many research suggests that it's as good as taking antidepressant medication or anti-anxiety medication. We release neurochemicals that absolutely help our state of being, so our wellness. And so yeah, I love it. That's my release.
So is it boxing or weightlifting or
Oh,
what are you doing?
well, yeah, I said figuratively hitting the heavy bag, but yeah, I do a combination of some cardio and weightlifting, and sometimes I take a team. We have a team that does. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tough Mudders or Spartan races. We do the sort of
Yes.
the combination obstacle course race and distance running type thing. I'm not the type that goes and runs a marathon. I think my sort of ADHD personality uh, won't allow me to just run continuously for 26 miles. I need to do something in between. So that's where the obstacles come in, and we have a lot of fun doing that.
Climb under barbed wire,
Yeah,
rappel
sure.
down a tower,
It's a mission, right?
get
Get through
filthy.
the obstacle course, get a little dirty.
Oh, well, that's
It's
great.
fun.
And even cooler that you do it as team building. But yeah,
Yes.
no, that's great.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
Scott,
cool.
this has been a lot of fun. What's your parting thought for our listeners today?
Well, a couple things. I think as a C-suite person, and a leader, I think I think of three traits, and I'll just end it with the three things that I think, if you want to be successful, and this is probably more so for, more senior leadership versus, staff in general, but have exceptional self and situational awareness, right? Be able to self-assess where you are, what your capabilities are, where you need to improve, and then what the situation is, because you have to adapt your leadership style to the situation. Second thing is put very competent people around you. I have what I call two ICs, which are my second in command. Throughout my career, I've had a second in command that I think is more skilled than me. Now, I might be in a senior position or above them, but there's so many skilled people out there. If you find one that fits your needs and it's really, a complement to your skill sets, or even they're more competent than you, be humble enough to say, you know what, I need this person around me, instead of putting people around you that aren't as good. And then the last and my favorite thing to always do is to try to inspire people.
Right.
That's really it.
Thanks, Scott.
Ben, I really appreciate the time with you. It's been great.